Hello everyone, Prime here, and I hope you've had a great day, because today we're going to be covering what exactly the Celtic and Slavic pantheons might be doing at this point in the story, or during the points of Ragnarok. During the Ragnarok storyline, Ares travels across the world and interacts with a series of different pantheons and gods. He does cause a bit of a disturbance. The justification for these disturbances gets a bit weaker as the story progresses. He kills several deities, such as Chuck, Anubis, defeats the armies of the Egyptian pantheon, and most criminal of all, denied an area of the Chinese area of the world vital sustenance, which we'll get into the effects of that in just a sec, and also possibly not just murdered Ganesh with fire, but maybe more Hindu gods as well. Now, under normal circumstances, Ares would not have been allowed to cause all of this havoc. Zeus just would not allow it. But Loki, Hel, and Al Kwang saw to Zeus's demise. Thanks to that, there really wasn't anyone who could properly keep Ares in check. It's true that it was mentioned that Athena was overall a better fighter and could defeat Ares in combat. I still get the sense that they're near equals, and it's not impossible for Ares to defeat Athena. You'll remember in the voodoo video that I said that the Chinese mythology, Japanese mythology, usually quite reserved from the conflicts that were happening in the story. That might not necessarily be the case after the storyline, because by disturbing the Chinese flow of worshippers, more worshippers have sort of been taken away from the equation, or worshippers may go to another pantheon. And the Jade Emperor didn't exactly have the most jolly of tempers, so I'm sure as he's been mentioned in the story, we could see tensions rise there. And as I mentioned, Ares burnt, well, technically it was Izanami, but Ares was essentially accomplice to the person who burnt this Hindu temple. So I'm sure the Greek pantheon, Greek/Roman pantheon, will be under some sort of conflict with the Hindu pantheon, definitely. But possibly also the Chinese pantheon as well. There's one thing that bothered me about Hi-Rez's initial story for Smite, and that was that there was a golden age of peace. Our current day and age is probably the closest thing in recorded human history that we're aware of a relatively peaceful time. You know, most countries around the world aren't necessarily ravaged or stuck in the woes and turmoils of war and conflict, and the Earth during this time is set in pretty medieval, pre-industrialization times. You're telling me that there are no human societies at war and everyone is enjoying a beautiful age of peace during these times? I mean, Smite is set in a fantasy sort of universe. From that sense, it could be possible, but let's assume for a minute that those that usually worship the Slavic gods and those that usually worship the Celtic gods are at war during the timeline of the Ragnarok storyline. Gods probably do love war, because during the original explanation of Smite, it's explained that during these battles of the gods, people worship the gods to try and put an end to their conflict, and these gods are empowered. But of course, during times of war, gods of war would probably be worshipped a lot. They'd see a good deal of worship. Gods of death would probably see a good deal of worship. And there are probably other gods who would see less worship, like the goddess of the hearth, for instance, assuming that the winning faction and their homes were not necessarily in any danger of collapsing, for instance. Thanks to this sort of shift in worshippers, I'm sure people may also branch out and worship other deities of war, because if there's no immediate end to this conflict, no side seems to be winning, or if in fact your side seems to be losing, then you might want to go somewhere else, especially as Smite establishes that people travel across the world and they know of these different pantheons. That would also explain why gods from other pantheons wouldn't necessarily want to be involved in this war, especially the Jade Emperor, Zeus, and Odin. Odin specifically is a god of war, so he probably would be receiving a direct increase in worshippers thanks to this conflict, so he wouldn't want to stop it. The Jade Emperor is probably seeing similar benefits, and Zeus is also seeing similar benefits, and Zeus was very, very cautious of anything that might tip the balance of his own power away from him, so he'd probably want to keep the conflict going. but there's a bit more of that we'll get into in just a sec. And remember, worshippers are very powerful. We got visual proof of also how instantly worship can be, as Athena ordered her soldiers to worship Ra, and his eyesight was restored, because Ares sort of damaged his eyesight. Also, if these two pantheons and people are at war, and gods of war are seeing an increase in worshippers, then it stands to reason as to why Ares was able to take on Shak, Anubis, Ganesh, and all of these other different gods without those gods putting up much of a fight, because he would have been more empowered thanks to the increase in worshippers during this time. It would also stand to reason as to why Athena, she'd be able to do what she did during the story, and she was quite strong during the story as well. Now for Athena, this might fall apart when you consider the last few episodes of the Ragnarok storyline, in which some random unnamed frost giant decides to pick her up and, you know, pretty much defeat her, and Nox has to help out. But you get the point. I'm sure that specifically was motivated by plot. We don't see a lot of gods of death or gods associated with death, such as Thoth, Aquash, and Osiris, because they'd be busy dwelling away in their underworlds, or the underworld if there's a shared underworld, and they wouldn't have to bother themselves with anything that's going on with the other gods because they're really powerful and really just too strong to care. That said, it also makes Hades look incredibly greedy when he really does actually care and is bothered by the fact that Anubis takes away some of his worshippers and smashes his statue. But I suppose if someone smashes your statue, then that's probably some sort of direct challenge or insult, and you can't exactly ignore that as God. Also, the fact that gods of war would also be consumed by this conflict between the Celts and the Slavics would also explain away why we don't see goddesses like Bellona, Discordia, Hachiman, as well as any of the Celtic gods. If we're to assume that the place that Nox helped Athena was some sort of Celtic area, then, you know, wars can be costly, ground can be lost. It can be understandable why that place was fairly barren, because people die during war. Places are torn asunder during war. So that makes sense. Coming back to why Zeus would allow this conflict to continue, during Greek mythology, a lot of events happened purely because Zeus wanted to maintain his power. He didn't want to give humans fire because he assumed that that would be a way for them to potentially take him down from his heavenly position. He ended up having to birth Athena because he was afraid of his child essentially being too strong for him and overpowering him and taking his throne on Olympus. So Perun, a god of thunder in a leadership position who could very easily take the same sort of worshippers that Zeus would occupy, helping a god like that? Letting that pantheon die would probably be within Zeus's best interests. The same can be said for pretty much the Jade Emperor, Odin, Ra, so on. So that's probably why that conflict isn't even mentioned, because Zeus and all the other leaders probably have a very specific or implied reaction to the situation, and they've already, you know, said their words final, done. You probably wouldn't want to challenge one of these gods, especially not Zeus. Zeus' temper tantrums are horrible to deal with. Of course, that's one explanation. Nothing that I've said here is necessarily canon other than the stuff that's actually been released, such as, you know, Ares burning the temple that Ganesh was sitting upon, for instance, with probably Ganesh on it. It could be that the Celtic pantheon has been wiped out, or even that the Slavic pantheon is just emerging. Remember, if the world was refusing to worship these gods, some of them may have just faded and become obsolete. That's a very strong possibility with this. Those are just my thoughts, though. Go ahead and tell me what you think about this whole thing in the comment section below. Do you think it's simply just the very obvious fact that Hera simply just didn't think about including some of these gods, or couldn't for practical reasons? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. But if you enjoyed the video and think that it deserves it, go ahead and leave a like. Really helps me out. And of course, if you're new to the channel and want to see more content just like this, well, clicking that subscribe button is the perfect thing you can do. Now, you should probably go ahead and watch my voodoo mythology video after this, just so you can get a better picture of the Smite stories as well, and a video that I did just before that as well, but links to that are in the voodoo video. So, probably leave the voodoo video in the description, and also in a card, and till the next video, have a very, very good day. I have been Prime, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.